Hey folks, you know I take my trail camera intel pretty seriously. It's a huge part of how I build my hunting strategy, and I'm always looking for gear that just flat out works. Stuff I can rely on. Backed by solid people and the best customer support in the business. That's exactly why I run Tacticam Reveal cell cameras. Whether you're just getting started or you're a full-blown data junkie like me, they've got a camera to fit your budget and your hunting style. My go-to currently is the Reveal 3.0 series with fully integrated GPS. These things are dead simple to set up. Less fiddling, more scouting and hunting. And they run on most major service providers and will automatically connect you to the strongest signal in your area. So no more hiking to the top of a ridge just to realize you've got the wrong service provider. Been there, not fun. Here's the kicker. You don't even need an SD card. That means fewer trips in, less pressure on your spots, and more real-time intel sent straight to your phone. And if you pair it with a Reveal solar panel or a lithium cartridge, you can keep those cameras running longer and spend more time doing what actually matters. Scouting new ground, dialing in a setup, or maybe, just maybe, finally cleaning the garage like you told your wife you would before the season started. Don't just take my word for it. Check out Tacticam Reveal at tacticam.com. Tacticam. Everything you need to take your hunting to the next level. Stay more comfortable, more concealed, and in the stand longer with Oscio gear. Premium camouflage apparel created for bow hunters by bow hunters. Oscio's revolutionary patented camo patterns and innovative features are designed to keep whitetail bow hunters totally invisible and dead quiet. Elevate your game with Oscio. Visit asiogear.com and take 20% off your purchase with code TRUTH20. If you're like me, e-scouting isn't just part of the process, it is the process. And nobody's doing it better than Spartan Forge. This is a veteran-owned company that built the only science-based scouting platform on real GPS collar data and artificial intelligence to predict deer movement. But where it really shines is with their imagery. Spartan Forge now has a high-res UAV coverage for 80% of the whitetail states, down to 5-centimeter detail. That means you can see trails, old logging roads, cuts, even subtle vegetation changes that most apps completely miss. And if you really want to get nerdy, their LiDAR layer breaks right through the canopy so you can see the forest floor. Gives you some visibility to those hidden draws, ditches that big bucks absolutely love to live in. Add in historical wind data and a desktop-only features like Eagle Eye and Cyber Scout, and you've got the most advanced hunting app out there. Start your risk-free 14-day trial today at spartanforge.ai. Welcome to the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast, brought to you by Tacticam Reveal Cellular Cameras. I'm your host, Clint Campbell, and you're listening to episode number 464. Today, I'm joined by my buddy Chad Sylvester to talk about mastering your hunt, when to specialize, and when to expand. So stay tuned. All right, folks, welcome back to another episode of the Truth from the Stand Deer Hunting Podcast. And we threatened it, and by God, we're going to make it happen, bring it to fruition. That is me and Chad, my good buddy, doing our roughly every month is as consistent as two guys that lack consistency can do it, you know. But this is another installment of us just kind of chopping it up on a specific topic. But before we do that, though, how you doing, brother? How you been?
Bro, I'm doing good, doing well. Everything is good here. And I have to laugh at that intro just based on our text conversation that we had last night, and it ended up being some kind of one-liner like Ray Charles leading Stevie Wonder or something like that. So
exactly,
the intro is fitting.
It's that's the way you and I roll, though, man. It's oftentimes the blind leading the blind, but we manage to make it through no matter what it is. Like if it's a hunt, you know, we have a good time. We sometimes find success. Regardless, we always enjoy each other's company, you know what I mean, and have a positive experience. Or we're doing podcasts and, you know, and just flying by the seat of our pants. For those that don't know, Chad is now the CEO of Truth from the Stand LLC. I told him it comes with real shit pay in a parking spot, but he has unlimited PTO. He can take as much time off as he wants.
And I said I'd take it.
Oh, nice, man. Well, before we jump into this, so just to kind of give everyone like, you know, a little sense of what we're going to do here is we are going to, as we've done in the past, we take a topic and we beat it up and kind of look at it from a bunch of different angles. Hopefully you all listening get something out of it. And today, what we're going to talk about is
kind of mastering your whitetail hunt. In that, what we're really going to talk about is when you should kind of look to expand your toolkit or expand your approach or whatever the case is, or when you should kind of look to just specialize and kind of drill down on something very specific, or maybe it's the thing that you're really, really good at, right? Part of the reason being is because by the time this episode comes out, we'll be probably close to the end of middle-ish to the end-ish of October. Those who like to hunt early probably have been in their bag of tricks already and maybe reaching that frustration point of, I can't figure out why I can't kill this deer, or I keep screwing this up, or what I've done in the past isn't working anymore, or isn't working this season, or whatever the case is. Or you might be, a rut hunter who is a diehard rut guy. And in my opinion, at least, like when you get to that time of year, it's such a short window that you got to you usually go through your A game really quick, your A spots, if you will, or your A tactics that you're really confident and comfortable with. And then what do you do when that runs out, right? Because a lot of times you have some rut left, or a second rut that's going to happen, like the second half of the rut, whatever the case is, like the back half of November. And then you're kind of, maybe sitting there holding your bow in your hand, if you will. I was going to say something else, but we'll keep this PC. Or maybe you took a trip for a rut and you're going to somewhere new that you've never hunted before, and it's all kind of a new game to you, right? And so how do you kind of battle that? But before we jump into that, I want you to give a little update, because the last time we talked, you were getting ready to go to Idaho, and you went to Idaho. And so I don't want to make you have to relive all of that again, but because I know as we've been talking, you've been contemplating and thinking real hard. So just so folks out there can have a sense of how your fall's been playing out so far.
Yeah. I'm still thinking and thinking even harder on that, I guess, is the best way to put it. So I'm not quite over that experience quite yet. Great hunt, a 7 to 10 day trip. On the front end, had some work related things going on. I don't know. We'll try to make this as short as possible, which is difficult with how much shit went on.
Especially the end. I mean, outside the hunt, even
had some travel frustrations on the front end of the trip. Anyways, get out there. First day that we hunt, we're going into a preset spike camp, essentially. Get in there, glass. Had a kind of an accidental encounter, really. The guy I was with had to go drop the kids off at the pool, so he grabs this emergency kit out of his bag, or his emergency situation kit, runs over the hill to drop a deuce, and I look up and he comes sprinting back. I'm like, what the hell? Like, either there's an elk over there's a bear, or there's a mountain lion, like one of the three, right? He comes back and he's like, there's a cow over here. So anyways, we grab our bows, take off. And as soon as we get over there to kind of peek over the top of that ridge to see where that cow was, we saw a calf, and then we saw a cow. And then maybe, within 2 minutes, there was a pretty good 6-point bull there. He drew, cow had us pinned down, like, encounter blown. I say that day 2, I branch off myself, put on a pretty good hunt, similar to my last story. Like, up in the morning, you see elk off at a distance, and it's like, I know what it's like to chase them for 3 or 4 miles now. So it's like, I ask myself the question, like, is it worth it? And I'm contemplating. Bull lights up, so I go over after him, obviously. That whole encounter went from going up and down about 1.5 miles, climbing elevation, losing elevation, to inchworming through a open sage field at like 9:30, to putting on a stock, to getting in within 20 yards of dark timber where those animals were. And I get into this stare down match with a calf and then a cow for the duration of 48 minutes. And I know that because I had a GoPro recording this whole thing, which adds to the pain. But out of desperation, after 48 minutes, like, I knew something was going to give. I was in lockdown mode with that cow, and I couldn't stand there any longer. So I just ripped a challenge bugle. Like, I grabbed my bugle tube real slow, ripped a challenge bugle, bull lit up, and within 5 minutes, he's coming at me. Usually with that type of interaction, they're coming in to defend their harem, like defend their cows, fight that other bull, or at least confront that other bull. In this case, I was expecting a frontal shot at like 8 yards because I'm in an aspen thicket just above the dark timber. As he's working towards me like 50 yards, he decides, hey, I'm not going to go fight this bull. I'm going to swoop in and just take my cows. So he cuts off the bedding area because some of those cows had bedded down 25 yards from me. He swoops down to get him, gets me a 30-yard shot. I have a pretty big window to shoot kind of through some deadfall. And I watched the arrow go through him. And I'm like, heart shot. Went and inspected the arrow. It wasn't a ton of blood. And it's obviously some time had passed there. But I found great blood within 20 yards and went like on an immediate blood trail where it's like, you're not sprinting, but like you don't have to stop to look. You know what I mean? There's a big spot here, big spot there. So I tracked that thing at about 100 yards. And I just happened to look up at one point and there's a bear on the blood trail. And I'm just like, okay. That turned into a little bit of an encounter. I heard a crash down below me as I kind of was yelling at the bear. He yelled, "Hey bear," to kind of spook him off. Then I thought it'd be cool to record on a cell phone. And then he decided he was going to turn around. And I was like, oh, don't get Western on me now.
Right.
But I cut down when I heard that crash, I thought that bull was down there. It wasn't. It was the cow. So I had to come back up, get back in the blood. The blood went to a wallow about another, I don't know, 175, 200 yards. I think the way the crow flies, first blood or at shot impact to that wallow was 300 yards. But I get to the wallow and there's no more blood. No more. I can't find discernible tracks on the other side. And it was thick and nasty with a bunch of blowdowns. And at that point, I was like, I had good red blood. It wasn't running like a muscle hit. It wasn't dark like a liver hit. No guts. So I'm like, maybe I hit just a little bit back and I got liver, and the red blood is just from the exit because he was downhill a little bit, and obviously he's going to bleed a little more on that second hole. So I came in and back. We went back in there the next day, searched, couldn't find him. Fast forward a little bit. A couple of days later, I'm back on that glassing point in the morning. As the sun comes up, I hear a bull bugle, and it's the 6 point that I shot. And he had 2 more cows. So that went on. I knew where he was bedded, but he kind of moved back in this aspen thicket. I spent the next 3 days getting close to him, but I could never get within 100 yards. Try to ambush him a couple times at night, but they weren't leaving that bedding area during shooting hours, and he was bugling a little bit less. So like he knew he was hit, but by the end of the trip, I think that he had 12 cows with him out in that same open sage flat. So he non-fatal hit. Freaking really disappointed in that. Obviously, like it's a lot of work, and most guys would say, yeah, if I can get one opportunity in 7 days, like I'm doing pretty good. Well, I had 5. I had 5 opportunities in 7 days. Drew my bow a couple times, only let 1 arrow fly. But the learning, I guess, the takeaway is like I need to be more patient, and there's something that I'm not doing, which I haven't got figured out. Like in the moment of truth, there's something that I'm missing, and I can't put my finger on it because everything worked in unison. Like this was the first year that I understood like that duration from food to bed, kind of their bedding hierarchy and the bedding structure, where the bull is going to be in relation to the cows, the calling sequences and communication between me and the animals, and then also like animal to animal, like 2 bulls, 2 herds, same area, like they're going back and forth. What are they saying to each other? Dude, like for the most part, things worked pretty good. I did make a couple stupid stalks and got winded and just trying to be overly aggressive towards the end of the trip. But yeah, so had all of that happen, okay,
this is my favorite part of the story.
Mind you, I don't know. Like we've been making these trips for a handful of years now, 5, 6 years, 4 years, 5 years, I think, maybe 6. Never even had to change a flat tire. Whatever, 26 hours one way, right? Never even had to change a tire. Well, on the way home, in the first 2 hours, we had to change 4 tires, and we only had 2 spares. So that's how the first couple hundred miles of the trip was. And then about 800 miles later, we're rolling into Omaha, and we start to hear this weird, funky noise. coming from the truck, like a rotational noise. Like it sounds like at first we thought, oh crap, turbo's going, we're pulling a giant car hauler. And then we thought maybe it was a rotational noise and maybe a bolt was backing out of a flywheel and it was hitting the housing or something, something like that. Anyways, we find the closest diesel shop, we pull in, they can't help us. They send us to another shop. We go to another shop and they're like, we'll take a look at it. We'll scan it, we'll run the computer on it. But if there's something wrong with it, it's going to be 3 weeks before we can touch it. And we were like, 3 weeks? Like, in there, he's like, yeah, 3 weeks, everything's booked. So we made some phone calls. That was the best like choice we had, I guess, as far as getting the truck back. We proceeded to try to rent cars in Omaha, which apparently like that's not a thing. And the 3 car rental places that they only have 2 cars, and they were all booked for the next 14 days.
Car rental, so not a thing in Nebraska.
Maybe there's a business opportunity there. Maybe we'll talk about that, Clint.
Yeah.
But couldn't rent a car to get home. Couldn't drive the truck to get home. So I was like, what if we rent a U-Haul? The U-Haul was our best option. It was like $1,500 one way, which is crazy expensive. But that was the only way we could get, like, we didn't want to leave the dirt bikes and all the other hunting gear that we had in the camper. We didn't want to leave it there, like in a random parking area. Like a lot of that stuff doesn't have insurance, Well, anyways, we packed that U-Haul and drove 800 miles home in a U-Haul, like a 15 footer.
Just listen to the engine scream.
And apparently,
because those things are super quiet,
man. Like you could hear mouse fart in those.
Yeah.
So the next 800 miles was the entire. You couldn't hear the radio. You couldn't call or talk to anybody on the phone. You couldn't even there's 2 feet between us. It's like the old bench style seats, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like we have snacks or whatever packed in the middle. So I'm like, John's 2 feet away from me. He can't hear me say boo. Like there's nothing for 800 miles, dude.
Oh my God. That's my favorite part of the story is that part. It's like, cause like, dude, that drive with like complete silence outside of like the tire rumble and engine screaming is brutal.
That was it. It almost felt like it was a cutout or a takeaway off of like the first Dumb and Dumber, like when they're driving in that. Mm-hmm. That's almost what it felt like. Anyways, that was a long-winded getting to the good part of the story, but that's how it played out. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, obviously I wish you would have got that bull, but dude, 5 opportunities in like 7-ish days, you can't feel bad about that. You know what I mean? Like you're at like the precipice of like nailing it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. But there's also a way of looking at it like, okay, you had 5 opportunities and you screwed all 5 of them up. It's like the extreme of extremes, I guess. But
right.
Yeah,
but
like,
you could also look at it like this: like a lot of guys maybe only get 1 opportunity a season and screw that up. So you've got 5 seasons worth of learnings. You know what I mean? Because if you think about when you and I started going to the plains at first, I mean you had great success that first season, right? And it was like right place. You read the script on what that deer was doing, found him, right? And it was like, just well played, right? And then the juxtaposition is like, it took me 3 seasons of going out there and screwing up multiple hunts over and over again until I finally got it right, And you and I have talked about this, so we won't belabor it, but that came to fruition because I had like all those screw ups those 2 seasons prior, right? It's like, I don't think that punt would have worked out the way it did had I not screwed up the things I screwed up before. Because I think it took all those things like to have that dialed. So now when I go places like that, and this is a great segue into what we're going to talk about, now when I go into places like that, like I've got a lot of confidence in going to like the plains to hunt. Like I actually oddly feel more confident doing that than I do at home anymore, mm-hmm. which is weird to say, but I just feel at home in those spots, and it goes back to kind of what we're going to talk about, which is like expanding or specializing, right? Because like for the longest time, I specialized in what I knew and what was around me, right? What I was most accessible to me. But when I had the opportunity to expand that in that area specifically, I feel like I blossomed then, right? It's just like a football player having to change teams, right? There's a good example of like Baker Mayfield, Darnold, and there's one other quarterback, Daniel Jones, who were all like thrown on the trash heap, right? All of a sudden they change situations, right? And now Mayfield looks like an MVP. Darnold last year looked like one, looks like it could be one this year. Daniel Jones is like, that guy has like memes about how bad he was, right? And all of a sudden,
revived his career.
Dude, he's dealing right now, right? And so it's just changes scenery a little bit, sometimes forces you out of your comfort zone, but it ends up landing you where you were supposed to be all along anyway, right? And that's kind of what the plains felt like for me, right? So let's kick this thing off with just like the power of specialization or the benefit of specializing, like of having like your A game. Like, do you want to start or do you want me to start? Like, just like what we think the benefit to that is.
Well, before we get started, like, this is why I love you.
Or maybe we should define it. Maybe we should define what these things are even.
Yeah, we could definitely do that. But I just think it's a very unique and interesting topic because I feel like in today's world, people are known by what they're specialized in, like specifically hunting, right? Like you can think about like
I'm a bed hunter, I'm a scrape hunter, I'm a rut hunter,
and not only that, but also maybe this is what's driving that. But when we think about the impactful people in our community from an influencer standpoint, like who's the bed hunter?
Mm-hmm. Dan
Infalt. Like, who's the aggressive mobile scouting? It's either the DeQuisto lineage or THP. Like, if you have the saddle hunter, like who's the saddle guy? So it's like it's just a unique topic of like that aspect of it, and then you put yourself into different hunting scenarios. And to your point, is it better to specialize or is it better to have that broad stroke approach? So just an interesting topic. So I appreciate it when you sent that over.
Yeah. I think it's interesting when you start talking about the different, I'll just say personalities and like what they're kind of known for. It sometimes feels like to me a little bit that most of the folks that you just named, and I don't think they necessarily do this facetiously per se, but they all have a stake in the game for why they like market, for lack of a better way to say it, a kind of like specialization, right? And it's because it's like, for like Cody, for it's, mobile hunting, right? And so, and obviously they have Lone Wolf custom gear, right? And so that mobile hunting, super aggressive bed hunting style, right, plays more into obviously in supporting like the products that they're making and stuff like that. And so it makes sense. And it's not like they created products to help them do the thing that they do, right? So it wasn't like they were like, hey, I've got this idea, we should create this thing called mobile hunting. Like, no, it's just like they already were doing that, and they were just like, let's create products that help us do the thing that we want to do, and the people who like to do it the same way too will probably benefit from it as well, right? So that, like, my point being, like, there was nothing facetious there. There was no like underlying like, hand wringing, like, ha ha ha. There was none of that, right? And the same thing with Dan, right? Beast style hunting, which is very, you could say like he and like the DeQuistos are kind of part and parcel, right? A little bit, right? Because they started things together. They used to be somewhat together back in the day, right? And they have beast gear and it supports those things, right? And then you got THP and that ultra aggressive mobile on the ground in a tree, like, whatever you got to do. They're not selling products, but they're selling content and merch and stuff like that. And it all is to the benefit of, the style that, approach that they take. Tethered, latitude, like whatever from the saddle perspective, right? Like it's all to the benefit of, that category, so to speak, right? And so I sometimes wonder if like specialization is people who really specialize, or are they specializing because that's how they are finding the most success? Or are they specializing because they have an aggregate of gear that suggests they should do something a certain way? Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And it's,
or I follow so-and-so and I want to be like so-and-so and I've bought every piece of gear that they've made, so I should do it like this.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I get your point. And even though THP is not selling products, like they're selling attention, then sell ad space for products. You know what I mean? So it all goes back to the product stuff. I think in the best case scenario, I think they're specializing. Again, best case. Not everybody in the industry is best case, but in the best case scenario, people are specializing because that's where they're finding success, and then the gear comes second because it helps them get incrementally better by those tinkerings or inventions or whatnot. In a normal case, I think it's 50-50. Like they probably started, like a lot like Exodus probably started because of they were doing something to get better at what they were already specializing or being good at, and then it turns into a business, and then now you're like have this juggling act. In the worst case, I think you're 100% right. I think people see a business opportunity, go in and invest in that, and then on the backside, like the marketing and the content is part of their strategy.
Right.
Yeah.
But
it's everything.
But what about the hunter's perspective though? Right. Cause like the business perspective, I think it cuts one or the other way. You either see an opportunity and you take it, right? Or you naturally do something and you're like, hey, this is probably something other people would want too. Right. Cause I know that's kind of how Tethered started, et cetera. I think from the hunter perspective, if I look at it from that angle, I look at it and go, the guys that have been in it a while and who are kind of dialed, if you will, like the advancements in gear, like they're picking the things that are going to work for them, right? It's like they're looking at it going like, because they were doing this stuff before any of like the lightweight mobile stuff came along or whatever the case is, right? But I think people who are newer, you know, because you see this in any category, even when I was a musician, it's like, if someone ever says, I need this thing before I can, they've already lost, right? It's the whole idea of like, if you're trying to start a YouTube channel, for example, and your excuse for not doing it is like, I'll start a YouTube channel when I can buy this camera that I want. Well, having that camera is not the reason why you're going to be successful or not. Like your ability to create good content, you know, that people are interested in is what's going to make you successful, right? It's the same thing in hunting. I need X saddle or stand or whatever in order to hunt this thing. It's like, well, no, don't use whatever you got, or just go in on the ground and just hunt and just do it. I think from the hunter perspective, I think sometimes people are looking for that magic bullet, right? And they're looking for the gear to be that magic bullet that's going to unlock this thing. And they look at it and say, I want to hunt like this, and this piece of gear lets this person hunt like this, so therefore it's going to help me do it too.
Yeah, I think that's a normal phase that most hunters go through at some point, and it's not an age thing. I think it's just an experience thing, right? Like when you're new, you want to find success. You want to find success fast, so you look to these centers of influence who are ultra successful or appear to be ultra successful because they may just hunt a lot, right? And then they try to fit their style into that mold to see if they can find that success. I think that's a perfectly normal thing for most inexperienced hunters to go through. So I don't think that you can know the difference and take the other side, Clint, until you've kind of figured out, hey, this thing isn't the magic pill or the magic bullet that's going to make me more successful. I need to have a baseline and build a knowledge base first before I can purchase a piece of gear.
Right.
Yeah.
And so when I think about specialization, you know, what I really think about, or I guess for me, what it would mean is that there's a certain type of scenario, setup, terrain, habitat, or whatever it is that me or whomever a person is, right, or whoever's having this internal dialogue with themselves, that I'm ultra comfortable in. And I can kind of look at something pretty quickly and dissect what it is and know kind of how to approach it. Right. I'll have a pretty good framework without having to do a whole lot of work. And I might have to do some work to kind of dial pieces of it in, but I know where all the pieces are. I just need to kind of figure out how they all start to fit together. Right. And even then, that doesn't guarantee success. Right. That to me is what specialization is. when expanding is whenever you kind of are plopped into an area that feels very unfamiliar. And yeah, you can go to the things that maybe you're used to, but you kind of know in the back of your mind that that's probably not the thing. Like you might have to start there to find something, right? And I think that's totally makes sense, right? Because you and I both did that when we went to the plains. We started doing what we knew how to do and then evolved it as we went and said, okay, this isn't working, right? Okay, well, how do I change? Okay, let's try this. And I did what you were talking about earlier. I was borrowing from guys who I knew were having success in those areas and just trying things that they've done or that they've told me about and seeing if it would work for me or not, right? And that to me is like when you start to expand, you start playing with things, right? You start to go to like your B, C, and D game because it requires it because you've run out of your A game real quick because it either doesn't work or you ran through it in the first couple of days of a hunt or whatever the case is. And now you're like, shit, what do I do now?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I think that's a great explanation. And there's a lot of talking points in there, right? Like I think it just boils down to critical thinking and like, honestly, a little bit of that intuition, the stuff that we talked about a couple months ago, because like you said, the easy thing to do is just go into a spot that you're familiar with, that's what you're used to, but you're never going to get any better or for that matter, maybe any worse. There's never going to be any growth until you go explore those things that you don't know and make you feel uncomfortable. But the kicker is like to be able to work through that process in an efficient manner where you can find success and you can say, okay, well, this specialty worked in this scenario. Let me put that in my mind bank. You gotta be able to critically think through those things. And like, I think that's the difference between maybe your average good whitetail hunter and the guys who are elite. And the guys that we mentioned about specializing in a certain tactic or strategy, or like you can even look at the juries, like they have things broken down into 2-week blocks because how fast the season's moving, and they're specializing in a certain strategy or thing for 2 weeks, and then they're moving on because they've taken that critical thinking process to build that knowledge base out, right? So that's kind of what it boils down to me. Like that's the difference between the average and good guy, and then the ability to critically think through situations like Andy May and guys who can do that on their feet. Like those are the elite guys. Those are the one of 100s.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think the benefit of specializing, there's no right or wrong answer. And that's kind of why we pick these type of topics, right? Because you can defend or tear apart either side and make it make sense, right?
Yeah. Zero-sum game.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's just fun to kind of talk about because I think a lot of these things, people find themselves in these situations whenever they're, whether they're hunting a place that they're familiar with or whether they're hunting a new place, right? Because to me, the benefit for me personally, of specializing, and I'll just kind of give an example, is that whenever I'm hunting at home, for example, or just say locally, like I have a pretty good understanding of certain spots that gives me confidence around certain times of the year. And what I've done is I've specialized in those particular areas that I've been able to kind of find repeatable events that I can start to kind of either mark on a calendar or mark whenever a weather change happens or something occurs. And I kind of already know what's going to happen, right? The example is the place where I killed my PA buck 2 years ago. That scrape turns on. I've been checking camera in that area because it's timing up. Because usually like this week, I usually start seeing like the first peckerhead bucks come in and start checking this scrape, right? Happens every year because next week around the 15th, 16th, and as Chad and I are recording this, I think it's the 8th or something like that, is whenever the first doe starts to come in because I've had a fawn drop early and I know that she's bred by the 20th of October, right? That doe family, right? And so that's specializing, right? It's like I specialize in that spot, knowing how to hunt that scrape and how to hunt that area, that scrape area based on prior events, right? And it gives me a ton of confidence being able to do that, right? So I'm curious for you, like, when you think about specializing, yourself, not necessarily a tactic or whatever, but like, what does it mean for you and where have you seen it kind of play out?
I think like for me, because I like to roam and I like the adventure aspect, I don't think it's necessarily a certain spot. Like when I had the journey trying to chase one specific deer and kind of specialize in that home range, on that terrain, on almost what those habitual, I don't want to say habits because that deer didn't have a whole lot of habits, but his tendencies and his personality, like taking that to another level. So I guess following your definition, that would be one example that probably did not play out well. I did have an encounter with that deer, but from that aspect, I think it's for me specializing in identifying abnormal terrains, like abnormal from a point where like I was talking about not using saddles before that was like a popular thing. Now everybody talks about that. Specializing in finding those micro terrain features that aren't always seen on topographical map based on, what your lines are set to. And I think for me, using that and going back into again, putting that in my mind bank and being able to draw from that, even in the plains and some of the stuff that we were hunting, the scale, the magnitude of that stuff is different, right? But like when you think about it in percentages, like a 6-inch ditch out there is like a 20-foot contour line in some of the hill country stuff that we hunt, and like deer are still going to gravitate towards that. It's still structure. So that's definitely something that it seems odd because you're in two totally different types of terrains and totally two different types of habitats, but the micro specialization, like within that specialty, can be used all over the country, regardless of what's happening there.
Yeah, that's such a great example. Like, because I remember when we first went out to the plains, that was. You look at it at first, at least this was my reaction to it, was looking at it going like, dude, I don't know how deer even live here. Like that was my first, if you want my honest reaction, I was like, my first, like I was excited and I was looking forward to it. But I also in the back of my mind was like, what am I going to do? You know what I mean? Am I just going to meander around this open field? Like, I don't know, and then you watch deer a little bit and you start to see how and then you're like, okay, they're still whitetails. They're going to use things like, it just doesn't look the same, right? I have to change my lens a little bit and look at things just a little bit differently. Right. So I want to switch it up here and then think about, because I think a lot of times when people think about specializing, you assume, and probably rightly so, that a person is really good at the thing, right? So if you have a pitcher who is a knuckleball pitcher, really good at knuckleballs, right? But there also is a scenario where throwing a knuckleball isn't great, right? Whenever you have a hitter that hits knuckleballs really well, like that's not good to be a knuckleball pitcher, right? Or you're really good at throwing curves, right? And this lineup you're going to face hits curves really, really well, right? Like that's a bad scenario. It's when specialization doesn't work to your advantage, right? So can you think about like what instances would you think of where specialization would hold somebody back? Not necessarily you per se, but where being so kind of myopically focused on an approach, right? Because like in hunting sense, like we were saying earlier, you have someone who's a bed hunter. Like I have an example in my mind. I was talking to Jake Bush about this a couple years ago, and he was, as we know, he kills deer early season often, and he got to the rut and was having a hard time, and until he finally just decided, he's like, look, I'm a bed hunter. I'm just going to hunt beds during the rut. He was like, and then lo and behold, he got on deer. Right. Which that's just like kind of one example where like his specialty kind of like threw him for a little bit of a loop for a little while. So I'm curious for you, like what is the downside to specializing in your mind?
Well, it's looking through a magnifying glass, right? Like, and you're only seeing such a small portion of
Great
what
analogy.
that whole actual picture is. Like, you have your regular reading glasses and you have this giant magnifying glass in front of you, you know? So I think here's the funny thing in my opinion, like guys are specializing to attempt to increase the efficiency to success. Like they want to fill a tag faster, more efficiently with more repetition. But when you're looking through that magnifying glass and you're not seeing the whole picture, you're not identifying like, hey, over in the right hand corner of the puzzle, there's this weird looking tree. It's dropping some kind of weird soft mass, and like for some reason there's a bunch of deer around it. You're not seeing that stuff. So it actually slows that progression down and slows down your efficiency because there's no purpose there, right? Like you're burning through time in attempt to get something faster than what you probably should. And like you just get stuck in this weird hamster wheel, dude.
I think what you're saying is, to put it in Clint's dumb terms, is like you have a sort of like familiarity bias where you're only focusing on and paying attention to the things that you're aware of and feel good with, right? And we've all been there, where we go to a place to hunt the same stand we've had success at before because, by God, I've killed 3 deer out of that stand, so it stands to reason I would kill another one out of it this year if all things are equal, right? Or we hunt areas that have really great historical sign, but there's no other reason for us to be there because there's nothing new, right? It might be a great starting spot. Like I personally like historical sign. Like that is something that I will actually kind of look for and gravitate toward. It depends. It's dependent on where I'm at. Like if I'm in the big woods, I use historical sign because the deer in those areas just don't lay down a ton of sign. And sometimes that's the best you got. Just something saying that bucks like to be here, right? Now you need to figure out what time of year they like to be there, but they like to be there. But what a lot of times the downside to specializing is that you end up being a day late and a dollar short because you're hunting things from familiarity as opposed to being forward looking and anticipating. And that was my big learning last year, was trying to figure out and try to learn. And it's hard, man. It's like there's everything in your body's telling you do what seems familiar because it's been right before. Right. But the reality is like a lot of times, especially when you're talking about mature deer, they don't do what all the other deer do. So you have to be in those areas that seem like you almost should have like a, what the hell am I doing here moment? Like when you have that feeling, that's probably where you need to be. You know, it's like I tried to explain economics to my daughter in probability and statistics because I was really good at both of them, like in college, but I'm not a math whiz. I said that my logic is that if I was going through the process of solving the problem and it seemed really logical, it was wrong. I needed to do it to where it felt like it didn't make any sense. And then I was on the right path. Right.
Yeah.
I was like, I feel like sometimes, especially when you're hunting an older age class deer, like it has to not make sense to you because most of what you know and experience are not those deer. The most of what you have experience with and familiarity with are younger subordinate deer, right? And so you can't approach it the same way if you're trying to kill something that's 7 years old based on what you see 2 and 3 year old deer do.
Yeah, no, that's a freaking great example. I mean, and I think that sums it up and paints a pretty clear picture of where you need to put yourself to be in that growth mindset to be able to, take that broad stroke and make it all make sense and make it work for you at the end of the day. Yeah.
Yeah. It's I'm trying to take a little of my own advice here this weekend. Like it's because as we sit here, it's like I got the
let's talk through it.
Let's get in this. You don't want to get in this brain, dude. It's a scary place. It's bad. It's a shit show.
You ain't never seen this one.
Yeah. I got the trailer packed up. I went to the big woods last weekend and just checked cameras and stuff like that. And of course there's not a deer up there that's like the one, in that area that was like the one I chased last year, may never be another one like that in that area, again. That's not my criteria, but I pulled cameras. There is I've got plenty of good bucks that I'd be happy to shoot any one of like the 7 or 8 that I have had on camera on a bunch of, different cameras, especially with a longbow. And there's one little area that I hung a camera, and I had a camera there a couple years ago. I didn't hunt this area at all. I didn't put one there last year. It was probably stupid. And I put one back there again this year, and just like clockwork, man, just like hammers showing up. Now it's summer, I get it. But there's this little pocket that nobody really ever hunts. And it's super kind of overlooked. And it has all the right stuff, right? And as I'm sitting here and have the trailer packed and getting ready to go, and I'm kind of thinking about, all right, got a nice weather change. I hunted some of these other areas last year, and going back to what we were talking about specializing, like I kind of knew from scouting and hunting and having visual confirmation of things, what kind of goes on in certain kind of sections during certain times, right? I kind of have an understanding of like where deer kind of want to be. Not 100%, but an idea. But this one area is kind of sticking out to me where I'm like, I've never hunted it. I've scouted it some. There's some sign in there, but not a lot. But it seems like a spot where if you were a deer, that you would just be left alone. Because there's no trees to really hunt. It's aged out, clear cut, so it's not like it's a food source necessarily that's going to drive deer activity. But every deer I had on that camera, and every deer that I've had the prior years that I had a camera there during the season, when you would get them in October or even during the rut, they were always walking into this spot. Always. Like that was like, there was 2 directions they were going. They were either going north and south, and that was probably 25% of the time, or they were going kind of like diagonally, but we'll call it east and west, and always kind of moving into this spot, right, in daylight hours. And so I started thinking back on that, and I was like, maybe this is an opportunity to expand. I need to kind of look at some other stuff outside of what I looked at last year, especially because I was chasing one specific deer and was trying to focus on what that deer was doing. And I think that this spot is like an overlooked little area where deer want to spend time just based on how I've seen them move. And it's the one spot last year that I walked by, walking in, didn't see anything interesting, walking back out, headlamp on, and there was a rub made in that area, like a pretty good rub made in that area between the time I walked by in and came back out. So it was just an evening hunt. So it was just a couple hours. So like a buck had come through there, made a rub, and passed his way through, went wherever he went. But so I don't know. What do you think? Like that was a lot to kind of lay on you, but that's kind of like where my mind is now as an example of like expanding, where it's like, I have to feel like I have to do something different.
Yeah, no, like that. I go back to my magnifying glass example. Like you spent a year looking through a magnifying glass. Like when you think about that whole entire area, from 30,000 foot, like you were concentrated on one area. So obviously you wouldn't have been in there last year. Now you need to broaden to get things happening, and that's what you're doing. Like that's critical thinking, dude. I think it's a good strategy, and it makes sense. Like to your point about your example about trying to stay broad,
right? And I cut a big track there last year in that area, and I knew it wasn't the deer that I was chasing, but it was I think I sent you the picture of that track. It was in hard ground that is adjacent to that spot.
So I haven't heard you talk about kind of this example or this spot like over the summer at all. Really, it was kind of, we'll see what turns up. I know there's not going to be another world-class deer there, but if there's something, a couple good ones there, I'll chase them. But I never heard the strategy around the overlooked spot and then tying back some of that historical sign to last year's sign. Like what was the catalyst to make you start thinking in that direction?
Yeah, it was really pulling some cameras and just watching, just the deer move, not a specific deer, but just how the bucks I was getting on camera in that particular area, the direction that they were always traveling, like always headed. They were going from one area, and I kind of knew maybe where they were going in the evening, and then back to this area, right? And it didn't really dawn on me actually until I came home, because I flipped through like all the, on my computers, I could see the images better, like flip through like a bunch of stuff. And then I was like, oh man, I was like, this seems very familiar to the way they moved like previously. And it just kind of dawned on me. So I went back and looked at like previous trail cameras images from that same location from prior years, just to make sure I wasn't crazy, like familiarity bias, right? I was trying to like debunk my own hypothesis, right? And when I started thinking about it, like I've walked through it a couple different times. It's shitty to walk through. Like it's not an easy spot to hunt. Like it's overlooked. But you're never going to hunt a tree. You're never going to hunt it out of a tree. I shouldn't say never, but it'd be almost, I would say 95% of the time you're not going to hunt it out of a tree. And it's going to be tight quarters. And there's but so many ways that a deer can make their way through here. I don't want to give too much away, but like there's some very specific ways that they're going to have to travel, if they're going to use it. And I remember walking through there in the past, and like it always had rubs and stuff in it. Like I'd always find rubs in it. I'd always find deer scat in it, and there was never really any scrapes, but I wouldn't expect any to be there necessarily. And this last detail I'll give, because I don't want to give too much out. There's in an area that's really, really flat, it's the one thing that has the ability to have an overlook. And that's when I was thinking about it because I checked the camera and I was walking back out, and as I was looking, I was like, if I were a buck, that's where I'd be. I was like, anybody that comes in or out. I was like, anything that comes in and out, person, coyote, whatever. I was like, you would know before they were even close. And then whenever I saw the deer movement, that was whenever it all kind of clicked for me. I was like, I think I've been overlooking like a really, really good spot. I don't think you're going to get run over with deer there, but I think like the right one you want to run into would be in there at some point.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Yeah.
So
is that a weather play, like first cold front type, October cold front type set?
Yeah. Cause I need to learn what's going on in there. I might even try to find a spot in there I can put a camera, just to kind of watch, even if I don't kill anything in there this year or whatever. Cause again, I'm on limited time because you and I are going to be headed west, so it's more of, can I throw a couple hunts in there and just see what's happening and see how I might hunt it? Is there a tree to get into? Do I see any deer passing through? Maybe set up a camera, gather some intels for some future hunts. Because I think it's one of the places. Also, this area gets driven during gun season. I also think it's a place where deer go, like when that happens, because they don't drive this part. Like they can't,
Yep.
So I think it's a little hidey hole that I've overlooked in the past. I shouldn't say I've overlooked it. I've walked it, but I just haven't. When I walked it, I should say this. When I walked it very early when I first started exploring this piece, and I didn't really have a great understanding of what good looked like there yet. And now that I have a better idea, I look at it and go, I think this is what good looks like.
Yeah.
But so for me, it's like I'm expanding my toolkit now, with ground hunting in the big woods, trying to looking at overlooked spots and areas that I'm familiar with, opening my aperture, what you were saying earlier, where it's like last year was magnifying glass. So I'm getting rid of the magnifying glass now for obvious reasons and kind of looking more holistically. So like, when do you think about kind of expanding? Like, what are the triggers for you when you're like, yeah, I got to shake shit up?
Well, I think it's when for me, again, I shouldn't speak for other people, but for me, it's when, I hate to say this, and as we're having this conversation, because I kind of look at myself as a generalist, the ability to do a lot of different things, but in general, like when I go to a place to hunt, whether it's a travel hunt or even something in state, like I'm always starting where it's familiar, and I'm not expanding until that lowest hanging fruit is rotten, and like I know it's not good to eat, so it's not working. I need to move on. Let me try something else. Which again, when I think about some of the better hunters that I know personally and have hunted with, they probably would take a more general approach of, hey, like I'm on this 4,000 acre piece of public. Let me drive the roads to see where the pressure is. Let me get eyes on this whole map um, before I kind of dive in. And that might take, 2 or 3 hours. But for me, I would be looking at a topo map on my way there, identifying certain spots. I'm looking for 2 or 3 things that would make a deer walk past kind of that area. I'm walking in, I'm picking a stand, and I'm going to bounce around and scout and hunt that before I back up and say, okay, hey, I need to get a better picture of the bigger idea of what's going on here. And I think that's probably just a habitual thing for me. But when I think about other hunters, I again, the majority of folks would get started in the same manner. But when you think about the guys who are finding success, even some of the young guys, Jacob Skellenar, like we've talked to him a little bit, and like I'm really impressed by that kid. So when you take these above average guys, I think that they're starting with that general broader approach and then kind of refining it, like top of funnel down the bottom of funnel.
Yeah. I think when you think about expanding your toolkit, I think it's what you talked about earlier, or expanding your approach, however you want to put it. I think what you talked about earlier with your elk hunting situation is a great example of how you're kind of going through the details of your hunt. And that's what we talked about whenever we first went to the plains, right? And I was going through some growing pains with that, which was, I think one of the clear signs, I think, at least for me, and it probably would be beneficial for people just in general, that if you are consistently knocking on the door but can't get it open, like that's typically a sign like, hey, there's something else you need to do. There's a piece here that either you're missing, overlooking, or you're seeing everything. Your approach isn't right. Right. And that was what I learned in the plains, because we were on deer pretty quick in good deer. And it took me drawing and getting busted multiple times, stalking and getting busted multiple times before I was like, okay, I know now the timing of this stuff. And I think you and I, what we called it, and we're using the plains a lot because you and I've hunted that as an example because we've hunted it together. We're getting ready to go back again in a couple weeks. But I think you and I started calling it being patiently aggressive. That was one of the things we had to learn out there. Because when we first went, we were like, Jared Scheffler, Chancey, dude, we're just going to run at it. Right. And we were like, hey, this isn't working for us. Like, what's going on here? Right. And we had to kind of like scale it back a little bit and figure out like when to be aggressive and when to just watch. And what I learned was, how I expanded, and this sounds weird because I don't want people to confuse expansion with action. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to actively do something. It could be thinking. For me out there, it was watching. It was spending more time watching than doing. And then whenever I do, it's like, man, I'm really dialed in. Right. And so that's kind of how I think about, expanding the toolkit, is typically when, you're knocking on the door and you're just not quite there. There's just something that's amiss. Right. And that's usually a time where it's like, I got to add something. I got to add a wrinkle.
Yeah. 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 The hard thing is trying to figure out what that wrinkle is.
Right. Yeah. And that's, I think, I think the hard part with hunting when you're adding things is that we have a window of time to do it. Where if you're talking like sports or something like that, it's like, okay, I need to learn how to throw. I got 2 really good pitches. I need a third. So I can spend the off season developing a third. Right.
That's a really good point. I just want to talk about this so it's not lost. But going back to that old jury tidbit that I gave about how they break the season down, like literally into 2-block kind of sections, or 2-week blocks, and like their strategy is very different between each 2 of those weeks. And I've never seen someone break it down as precise as Mark and Terry. But my point here is for other hunters is because of tactic, strategy, approach, a way of thinking didn't necessarily work in the middle of November, that doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong. It could just mean that the timing is wrong. And that's applicable in late October when sign is hot and deer are laying actively working scrapes versus hunting peak lockdown where those bucks are in doe bedding areas. They're not out laying that sign that you think is fresh, but it's 2 weeks old.
Yeah, that's such a great point, because a lot of times, like, the specialization really works. It's only your specialization only really works when the timing's right. Because, for example, I don't want we'll speak in generalities here just because that's what we're doing, but I don't want, nothing's absolute, I guess is my point. So nothing's ever 100%, but generally speaking, you're probably not going to find a ton of success bed hunting in November 13th, right? Like, that's probably not the time you want to be doing that. Maybe doe bedding areas, possibly, right? Just like you probably don't want to be hunting scrapes November 3rd through the 6th, right? Like, those have already been hit. They're probably dried up. They've gone cold. They probably will open up in like 2 more weeks for a very short period of time, right? But you probably want to focus on those at the end of October if you're a scrape hunter, right? Or you might have some ones that are really, really good that maybe you can get away with hunting earlier in October when deer start to get fired up a little bit and start making their initial kind of rounds or whatever the case is, right? You don't want to hunt a food source in the morning, right? Like, as an example, right? So it's like that specialization has to be timed, right? I think whenever you're a little bit more of a generalist, you just have a lot more tools in your bag, and timing is still important, right? But you just have a lot more things you can kind of pull from, yeah, but that's a good point. So I think the big question is how do you balance the two, right? Like, it's like Kenny Rogers said, man, like, got to know when to hold them, know when to fold them, right? And that's kind of what we're talking about, right? Because going back to the idea that we have, just say for archery season, we have a window of time and it all happens quick, man. It like you're saying, like, the juries have it broken down in 2-week increments, but really the timber's changing week to week. And that was really eye-opening for me. I mean, we know this academically, but that was really eye-opening for me last year because I spent every week, multiple days a week, chasing that deer. So I was watching how things were changing on a daily basis, or, almost on a day-by-day basis. Like, sign was hot here one day, the next day it wasn't. 2 days later, it's over here, right? So knowing when to kind of like push all your chips in the middle on the thing that you're really, really good at, right? And knowing when to step back and go, I need to do something different, right? Because if you miss that by a day, that might be the only chance that deer is going to walk through the one area you could hunt, for example, or the one day you could hunt, and that opportunity's gone.
Yeah, I think I will probably die on this sword, but I always go back to some type of historical data, knowing, and you could argue maybe intuition because you've been in that scenario over and over and over, and you can kind of see or envision. I don't want to say predict, but you have enough foresight to say, okay, well, there's a high probability of that scenario replaying because of my past experience that was 2 years ago. That's one way to do it. I would consider that intuition, relying on your gut. But then, like, the historical data, I think, is ultra important. All variables being the same. And that's not just trail camera data either. Like, that's where my world was, or where it stemmed from, was trail cameras. But to your point, you've kind of used a multitude of scouting tools to figure this out in your areas, but those are hunts. Those are scouting missions from the past. Those are observation sits. It's kind of both of that combined. But for me, those are the only two ways to conclusion. Like, you could take the approach of throwing a dart at the wall, but it's probably not going to work very good for you.
Right. Yeah, I'm big on, obviously, I learned a lot under your tutelage when it comes to historical data and like long-term data and stuff like that. And so I very much rely on that. I think I would think about it in the sense that, like, balancing them is, and I think part of this played out a little bit last year. And I've seen it work when you and I have hunted together, where, like, we kind of use this, like what we're good at, like this, our specialization, if you will, as we're staying on topic, as like our fundamental foundational things that we use as a rubric to kind of evaluate, right? And we use that as kind of our base, if you will, to kind of, evolve from. It's always our starting point, but it's not always our end point, if you will, right? And the reason why I said like this, I've seen this for both of us in different ways, where again, the plains, where it's like my experience there was very much like using foundational things at first, and then I had to quickly evolve, or not quickly, it took me 3 effing years. It's not very quick. The special needs guy over here, you know what I'm saying? But I had to evolve like from my base over time. And then now some of the evolution that I had, or some of that, expansion that I went through, is now part of my base, right? So my base just got a little bit bigger. My foundation got a little bit bigger. Whereas your experience there was you went back to your foundation, and that was how and why you killed that deer, right? It was like, I'm going to cut hot sign, and then I'm going to find where he's bedded. And then I found where he's bedded, and now I'm going to hunt him where he's bedded. Right. And so those are just two very even though we come from a very similar school, right? It's just two different scenarios required two different approaches. Right. And they both stem from starting from what we do well. Right. It's just, we let the hunt play out, and we evolved whatever that scenario was as it chose to evolve. Like, I think the biggest thing is like, you don't try to force square peg and round hole. You kind of let the hunt come to you to a degree. It'll tell, if you listen, it's like most things in life. If you just listen, it'll tell you what you're supposed to do.
Yeah. And honestly, one of the best ways I've ever heard that put come from you, like, and you probably use this on a podcast, but it was in a phone conversation. You said, I'm going to stop hunting the deer the way that I want to hunt him, and hunt him how he wants to be hunt. Like, and that will forever stick in my brain as like, okay, well, like on the surface level, like that sounded really cool, but intellectually, in a deeper sense, like, what does that mean? And like, it's everything that you just said.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was honestly how I killed that plains deer. Right. And that was, I think it was that conversation we had. It was like, I'm going to hunt him. I'm going to kill him the way he wants to be killed. Like, that simple. And that's very much like, and I think I even credited at the time, like in a podcast somewhere, like that's a very jujitsu mindset, right? Where it's like, you don't force things. Jujitsu is like I guess the purest form is that you're using the other person's momentum and things that they're doing against them, right? And ultimately, at the end of the day, like that's what we're trying to do when we're trying to kill deer, whether it's your first deer or whether you've been doing it a while and you're trying to kill the most mature deer in the woods. When you're successful, it's usually because you did, whether you knew it or not, you put yourself in the situation to kill the deer the way it wanted to be killed. Like, you don't ever kill one by forcing it. Like, I'm going to go kill this deer. It's like, no, they're the X factor in all this. They have to be a willing participant in it, right? Unfortunately for them, right? but yeah, that's exactly it. That's a quick one-liner that kind of mentions it. So, like, how do you, like, when you think about balancing this, like, is that kind of like the way you frame it up anymore, is just like that simply?
I think so. Yeah. I try not to, that's one thing that like where I am in my journey or cycle is like, I don't want to say simplify things, because there's times that things aren't simple, but I want getting back to a place where I'm thinking less, but still critical thinking around the important things, and letting my intuition and gut kind of guide me from my past experiences, if that makes sense. And that's how I'm handling it now, maybe 5 years from now, like trying to balance that, general approach versus being specialized, probably be in a different phase, and it'll have a different attitude around it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I'm in the same boat, trying to make things as simple as possible, trying to take things for what they are, and not read too far into them, and and paralyze myself from making a decision, right? In years past, the spot we were talking about before, I probably would have never hunted it because there's a bunch of reasons I could probably give you why I shouldn't, right? But that's exactly why I should. Like, and so going back to the illogical answer kind of approach, right? It's just one of those things where it's like, I would have talked myself out of it in years past. And this year I'm kind of like, no, I should totally try it. Like, I just need to go see, I won't know until I know. Right. And I think that's part of it. It's like you start to have to get out of your own way and realize maybe you're not as smart as you think you are. And some of it is like, you just need to go do it and experience it. And then you'll know, right? Because you can't, we don't see the future, right? Like I don't have ESP or whatever that, whatever that is that helps you do that stuff, So it's like, I got to just go see it. Right. And that's the only way I'm going to know. So any parting shots or any last thoughts before we wrap this thing up?
No, man, I'm just getting excited for November.
Yeah. The trailer's ready to rock, dude. It's ready. I put the solar panels on it today, so it's geared up for the season. It'll see you in the Midwest in a few weeks. I'm looking forward to that, and we're gonna bring out a couple deer together this year. We're gonna we've each killed in the trailer. Now we need to double up a season where we both get one in the same year, and that's the goal this year.
Yeah, man. I like it.
All right, buddy. Well, as always, buddy, I appreciate you coming on, and we'll see you in a couple weeks.
All right, brother. Thanks for having me.
All right, folks, that is a wrap for today's show. I'd like to thank all of you for listening. And if you haven't yet, please head over to iTunes and leave us a 5-star rating. And be sure to subscribe to the podcast. And hell, while you're at it, head over to YouTube and give us a sub there too. I'd be super appreciative if you do those couple things for me. And before I shut this thing down, I need to give a big shout out to our partners who continue to help us make this podcast possible. Tacticam, Osseo Gear, Hawk Optics, Face Off E-Bikes, and Lathrop & Sons Boot Company. And until next time, we'll see y'all.